Language, the sixth great transition of evolution. And unfortunately, animals weren't along for the ride. In fact, language is an ability unique to humans only. And that's important to know because we try to use language with our dogs, and oftentimes we fail. Communication in the wild among dogs and other animals is basically a form of a behavior. Dog A, not able to interpret the mental state of dog B, sends a signal. Not to have a two-way conversation with dog B, but to influence the behavior of dog B. And dog B can either respond or not as a consequence of that signal. So out in the wild, they don't use words like we do. They use symbols, signs, and signals. And this is really, really important because here's why. It's a form of semiotics. If you want to talk to your dog and train your dog, you have to obey the rules of the animal kingdom. They're very, very stereotypical in all of their signals. Case in point, in the study of semiotics, there's three components. There's a signal, there's an interpretant, and there's a referent. Okay, so let me kind of give you an example that we humans get. You're driving down the highway, and you see this hanging off some sign. The color is golden. Okay, you interpret that as McDonald's. Why? You've eaten there many times before. Now, McDonald's is operating like dogs do and wolves do in the wild. Not knowing your mental state at the time, they just plucked that big old sign out there, just plopped it out there somewhere on a big pole, and they're hoping that when you see this, you will interpret as McDonald's and you'll want to eat there. Because again, B, which is you at that moment, you have the ability to respond or not. But that's semiotics there. If you have, for example, a deer sees a human. The deer thinks danger, danger. Why does the deer think danger? Because of the referent, ancestral predation. So the same thing occurs with our dogs all the time. If I tell Captain, for example, sit. Good boy. Way to go, buddy. Good job. Okay, so my command sit was a signal. He interpreted that to take up a position in the sit, put his little butt on the ground. And the referent, well, he's probably done it about 5,000 times. Okay, so that's called semiotics, and that's the way animals work. When they communicate with one another, they're not trying to strike up a two-way conversation. I send a signal, and you either respond or not to the signal as a consequence of the signal. So we always have to keep that in mind. Where we start to make a lot of mistakes is we do things like, can you sit? Can you sit? Oh, how are you doing today? How are you doing? Can you do a big rollover for me? Can you do that down? Roll over? Can you do that for me? Oh, no, not doing it so good today, down. Roll over. There you go. Good job. But what happens is we start talking too much, thinking that the animal's picking up an entire sentence from us. No, this is again like you. You're driving down the highway and you approach an intersection and there's this thing hanging over the intersection with a red light, a yellow light, and a green light hanging right over the intersection there. This is not talking to you. McDonald's was not talking to you directly, but they were using a symbol or a sign to influence your behavior. And we have to do that with our dogs. We always have to influence their behavior by using signals and signs. Now, there's another little rule for it. I'm going to show up here. If you're going to do this, the only reason why this works is because I told Captain sit. And he interpreted that as sit because he's done this body position over 5,000 times. This would not have worked if I had said scuba dog. Well, then again, maybe it will. But he's also taking his cue off of many things that I'm doing, including my hand gestures, the way I'm looking at him, because he knows I'm holding a bunch of treats right here and he wants it. But free, scuba dog. Yeah, he's just coming back for the treat, and that's part of the signal suite as well. Okay, so a couple things when you want to use a semiotics with a dog, which is what you should be doing. Let me flip this chart over here. There's a couple things. One, always, in order for this to work, to always have a sign or symbol or a signal and an interpretant and a referent, you must, one, stereotype the signal. Okay, so you hear all the time, use the same command. Sit, down, come, stay. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I mean, imagine if you're trying to learn a foreign language and maybe you went down to Mexico and you learned that the bathroom was baño. But then all of a sudden the next day someone says, it's the loo. And then the third day they say, I don't know what the heck they would say. Maybe they call it the scuba nog. Well, you'd be mightily confused within no time at all. You have to always stereotype the signal. But here's the thing that most dog owners don't understand. Not only must you stereotype the signal, but in dog training, if you really want your dog to do the command, every time you give the command, you must also, so I'm going to go a big plus sign here, stereotype the response. Okay? You have to stereotype the response. Let me give you an example. Let's say you call your dog and you always use the word come. Okay, that is signal one. Signal one. And what you're hoping to get is a dog that will respond with R1. Signal 1 to R1, response 1 to signal 1. Come back to you. Come back to you. But the next day, you call your dog, and maybe your dog does what's called R2. In fact, it goes away from you instead of back to you. And the third day you call your dog does R0. It doesn't do anything. It just looks at you like you're stupid. So what's happening here is that you are using signal 1. You are using come all the time. You have stereotyped the signal, but you have failed to stereotype the response. And now basically what happens here is that I've told you before, dogs always assign a cost-benefit analysis to everything they do. So this dog would simply come sometimes if it decided there was a benefit to that. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I want to come inside. It's hot out here. But the next time you call your dog, the dog says, no, I think I want to chase the squirrel. I'm having a great time chasing the squirrel. I'll be in just a minute. And then the third time you call the dog doesn't want to do anything but just lay in the yard. So basically, this is an animal that is assigning the benefit to whatever the way it wants to respond. If you want to avoid that and you want your dog to come every single time, you have to give the same signal and you have to require that the dog respond. All of my dogs, Captain, all of our dogs I've had over the years, every single one of them, when they were being raised in my household, they were always on the long line when I was home. Always. Why? The long line allowed me to make sure that I got R1 to every S1. R1 to every S1. I never allowed R2. I never allowed R0. And guess what happens? Over a period of time, your dog will then fall into what we call, in its brain, the learning will go from explicit learning to procedural learning, and that's where habits form. Deep grooves, kind of like Pavlov's dogs. A deep groove in neuronal channels. If Captain actually saw a dog be called by somebody, and that dog didn't go to its owner, I guarantee if he did have language, he would look up at me, look back at the other dog and go, I didn't know you could do that. Can you do that? He really doesn't know he can't do that. He always comes to me when I call him because I gave S1 and I flat out required R1 every single time. All right, and then one last little thing. Not only must you stereotype the signal and stereotype the response, but you must also be prepared to raise the signal, be prepared to raise it in the presence of noise. So what is noise? Noise could be anything. It's called a competing signal. It's very rare for your dog to be out there anywhere in the world, or even yourself, and only have a singular signal. You have multitude of signals, and they will try to influence your behavior. So, for example, if I taught Captain how to sit, okay, so I have a solid line from S1, sit, and I have a solid line to the referent and my interpretant. But here's the problem. If I never taught Captain how to sit, When the doorbell rings, then I can't really expect him to sit because I have a dotted line between the referent and the signal. This is called conceptual distance. So therefore, like we always say, not only must you give the signal and require the response, those are stereotypes, but you have to be ready to raise the signal, and you have to make sure that you train the behavior under every condition in which you want the dog to respond and respond reliably. Just to give you a human example, I'm back to my intersection again. I'm driving this way. I get a green light, okay? That's mine. That's my signal to me that I can proceed through the intersection. But out the corner of my eye, here comes another car at a high rate of speed going perpendicular. Because I've been driving for a while, my brain interprets that signal my interpreter is possible danger. Why? Oh my gosh, how many times you see cars blow through red lights? So I have a referent. And because of that, the noise of the car approaching was greater than the green light signal to me. And therefore, that now influences my behavior and I slow down. So out there in the world, you're going to come across a bunch of competing motivators, competing cars. They want to go to the intersection before you. Your dog is going to will know how to do a sit, do a down, heel with you. But anytime you're training, if you encounter noise, and that could be anything, the other dog, a car going by, the doorbell ringing, you have to be ready to increase the signal to be able to get the dog's response. And a lot of times that'll be in the form of a correction. Hey, no, I mean it. I swear. Yeah, you really, really, really do have to lay down right now. And you really do have to come. And we'll get into more of that deeper down the road as we talk about how to do that and to create the reliable response that you're always looking for. Okay, but I also want to kind of just show you just a fun little video here. We have several dogs in our household, and one of them is a Morkie, a little Maltese Yorkie mix. And her name is Poe. And I'm about to tell you, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can just forget life. It is all over. It is all over at that moment. This is Poe trying to influence our behavior. That's a dog saying, hey, humans, feed me. And as you'll see here, she'll escalate. She raises the signal because there's the presence of noise. And what is the noise at this moment? Nothing more than us ignoring her, not giving in to what she wants. Now you hear a little growl, a little scratch, a little bounce around. Sound like some woman's been smoking for about 60 years, that voice of hers. There we go. Okay. Well, that's what they'll do. That's what your dogs will do. Well, every now and then when you're training, you've got to be able to raise the signal enough to overcome, to trump other things going on. Every one of you have probably trained your dog in your backyard or inside your house, got great results, only to fail miserably when you are out there in the real world and you're around noise. Okay, so a quick review. Semiotics, real quick. That's how animals communicate. They use a sign or a symbol or a signal. If the other animal is to respond at all, they have to be able to interpret that. And if they're going to interpret it, it's because they have a referent. So when you train your dog to do any commands, you follow this. Stereotype the signal, stereotype the response, so the interpretation is always what you want the animal to interpret the behavior to perform. And then be prepared to raise the signal anytime you encounter noise, because you're going to have to. Don't expect the dog to hold a downstay with a freight train going by if it's never done a downstay outside of your living room. So you've got to prepare for that. All right, guys, so that's just a little brief, quick Cliff Note version of how animals communicate and how we need to communicate with them. Try not to use long sentences and over-modulate your commands by going too high in your voice. When I give Captain a command, as you see there, we'll cover this, that dogs actually learn with their eyes before their ears anyway. But I can get him to do many things. Come. And every time I give him this command, I'm going to make sure he does it. Come. Good. So the commands are just pretty singular. Down. Up. He wants to roll over. Roll over. Oh, good job. He pivoted away from the E, so way to go, cattle dog. That was a pretty good move there, pretty slick. All right, guys, we will be getting deeper and deeper and deeper in this as we go along here with all these videos. But that's enough for today. I'm still dealing with my allergies here, so I hope you were able to make out what I was saying to you and I was communicating to you. But guys, this is the basis of all animal communication. Rewind as much as you need to. And if you found this information really helpful for you, or if you're at least a bit confused, then reach out to me. I'll be glad to explain it as best I can because you can get pretty deep here. But if you found it helpful, please share it. Please share these videos with anyone and everyone because these aren't just for you. Even though I love you guys, they're for everyone. Remember my whole goal for a year, and that is to lower our stress response, lower our blood pressure, make us want to have our own personal therapy dog. That's what we need. That's what we need these days and times. All right, this is day 17, man. I look forward to you guys tomorrow. We'll go over some other deep stuff here. One's called the threat zone, one's called a critical zone. What does that mean for you and your dog? I'll see you guys around.